Kia ora tātou whānau, talawhalawa. And it's my privilege to introduce our final keynote speaker, Mary Lee Kennedy. Tēnā koe e rangatira, Mary Lee Kennedy, talofa, Pacific greetings, and a warm good afternoon to you. Welcome. Nau mai, piki mai, hare mai, awhio mai, susu mai, mea mai, are mai. Mary Lee Kennedy is the Executive Director of the Association of Research Libraries, or ARL, which represents 124 members of libraries, archives, universities, federal government agencies, and large public institutions in both Canada and the United States of America. And for me, in today's fast-paced world, changing technology, changing demographics, and impact of social media and information, fast-paced information on libraries, and how we in the information sector engage with our communities and connect is very important and crucial that we remain relevant partners in the research and learning ecosystem. I especially enjoyed reading about Mary Lee Kennedy's embracing of innovation, diversity, and inclusion in her work, and the empowerment of local and global communities to create and use knowledge that enhances lives. Mary Lee Kennedy brings a wealth of knowledge in academic research libraries and knowledge e-corporations, and she is bilingual in English and Spanish. So welcome. We welcome you with a warm clap. Yeah, welcome you.
So good afternoon. It's such an honor to be here today with you, to have been invited to LIANZA. This is my first time ever in New Zealand, and so I have spent the last 2 days learning a lot from you. But I will leave here. I think more than anything, all the relationships I've created here, but I stand in awe of the cultural connections and the engagement you have shared with me, the threading of the diverse experiences and perspectives you have and hold with so much respect. It gives me hope for the terribly deep divisions that are in the community that I live in today. I've chosen to speak on a topic that I believe to be fundamental to us as leaders of libraries, as members of a society in significant flux, and really partners in a long history of the journey of humanity from the past and for the future. Most of the time, I'm a very hopeful person. People would say I'm one of those half-glass people. But every once in a while, sometimes because we know too much or maybe because we don't know enough, we become very concerned. And I see where we are today as an opportunity, not only an opportunity, but we are taking these steps to create a healthy balance between technology and our very humanness. My passion has always been to empower people to create the lives and achieve their dreams that they choose. And I believe the ability for them to do that through knowledge is an important element in the magic formula. And my life has always been about living in the integrated space of physical and digital. And now we live in a world of physical, digital, and biological, all of these integrated. I grew up professionally in high tech, building information at your fingertips. After living for about a decade in Mexico, working with British councils and others to make information accessible, experiencing firsthand the incredible knowledge that existed in the Mayan culture, but did not have a way to be preserved nor disseminated. I also saw in Mexico and in inner city neighborhoods of New York City and others what it means not to know. I led an amazing academic institution as well as a very large public library. And it is this breadth of experience that I think is the reason why they hired me for the executive director position a little over a year and a half ago, because I can bring that mix of experience and perspective as we as an association work as a collaborative partner focused on the well-being of all future generations. We have a real chance to learn from the unfettered days of the internet, and libraries of all kinds have a critical role to play. Today, I will talk to you about research libraries and archives, and by necessity, a North American perspective, though I hope all the themes will resonate more broadly. Recently, I was privileged to hear a keynote by Jaron Lanier, and if you don't know him, he actually invented virtual reality, among other amazing technological innovations. But he warned us about the ethical and power-based uses of technology, about the need for them, particularly given the power of data. And you know, if you know Jaron's work at all, he is quite specific about his concerns, and his recent book really focuses on how you should delete your social media accounts. When asked what role libraries play in this time, Jaron sees a special place for libraries, and I've heard this throughout the talks today. Libraries are really an institution. They're not just a place, they're an institution. And perhaps one of the only institutions offering a role in personhood. And the way he described this was libraries are an institution in which people can find a private space, a space to figure out who they are before sharing their personhood with others. Lanier and others I know and have read reflect some of my own hopes and concerns for our society, in which the exponential growth of technology creates tremendous opportunities for our communities, yet challenges the ability for us to live by a set of values, establish relevant laws, and appropriate governing structures. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because you've heard a bit of that today already. But this association was founded by Canadian and US research libraries in 1932. It does include many national libraries, including the National Library of Medicine, the National Agricultural Library, our National Archives, the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, New York Public Library, Boston Public Library, and many large research libraries in higher education. I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that these leaders of leading institutions feel a deep commitment to contributing, like you, to knowledge stewardship and the advancement of knowing, particularly in a time in which the ways of knowing are changing. Some might say there's even a crisis of knowing, that we are forgetting how to know and choosing to forget. I'm not going to be too distracted by this word crisis because there's so many tangible acts we can take and are taking to demonstrate a path forward. Many of those I saw today and yesterday. But let's be accountable as knowledge guides that we are meant to be. It is time to come together, to look outwards, and to choose the future we seek. We must choose whether we turn away from our humanity or continue to focus on our power to empower others through human understanding of truth, recognizing and connecting with many realities, policy setting on what is shared and what is not shared, valuing and engaging different ways of knowing and knowledge, preserving and, as necessary, defending intellectual freedom. In essence, we need to take a bold stance. The fourth industrial revolution is expected to create up to $3.7 trillion in market value by 2026. While this might seem an abstract concept, it is happening all around us. There are an astounding number of new inventions, many that we experience every day and many that we are oblivious to, but they're there, and they're occurring with rapid disruption. This chart simply explains some of the changes underway and some of the serious issues that we need to address as a result of these changes. If this potential is to be put to use for public good, it requires strengthened collaboration between governance, businesses, academia, civil society, and us. On the one hand, this is the beginning of enormous potential for individuals living, such as wellness and healthcare, and we're already seeing it in personalized education and deeper knowledge of complex systems. We experience this in our homes, in our smart cities, in our discoveries of the universe, and as we debate the ethics of it all. But these emerging technologies also create risks that we must understand in proactive, informed ways. Even deeper, will we have even wider digital divides? What about climate impact? What about biases and privacy? Let's briefly look at this intersection in the context of something a little closer to home, which is higher education. Recently, John Pye, who's the Director of Digital Strategy and Architecture at the University of Auckland, says that while AI has been gaining momentum in the research areas of the university, it is now being used more frequently in predictive analytics for both learning and teaching and in administration. This is common in the United States and Canada as well. But there are also some ethical questions that remain unanswered. If a student is passing by the writing center and data suggests they are failing a writing course, is a reminder notification ethically okay? If a student's attendance, engagement, or performance matches a profile of students who statistically do not succeed, is it ethical to talk to them about taking a break from their studies? And whose data is it anyway? And can they manage their own data? Often, perhaps most days, we are living at warp speed technologically, while our own biological states remain rather static, and our minds seek a context in which to make a decision and to act. And we've been wonderfully reminded by Monique that we are indeed very human, that we travel at the speed of trust. At the naming of the fourth industrial revolution, Klaus Schwab, who is recognized the originator of this phrase, made it very clear what the fundamental context needed to be: a future that works for all, first and foremost, tools by people for people. And so here we are, one of the most trusted institutions today. What are we doing, and what can we do to live by this call to leaders and citizens? So as a collection of leading research institutions, the Association of Research Libraries has really focused on systemic breakthroughs. We work at this intersection of research and learning communities, public policy makers, research libraries, and their parent organizations. Our focus is on that intersection of policy and practice. It is our responsibility to align with the needs of the research and learning communities. That's the outward view. Understand what's on their minds, what's important for them. And through that, work in institutions and public policy makers. And together, the shared mission is to advance an equitable, barrier-free, and enduring research information environment. It requires us to work at the local level in a highly, compared to New Zealand and Australia and Canada and Europe, a highly decentralized governing environment in our national context and with international relationships. We recognize that there is a lot of complexity while we're still seeking reliability. And like all complex environments, we need to be and are willing to share power and to be agile. These are essential core competencies for all of us. So it begins with understanding the research environment. And since we are based in Washington, D.C., our focus is really understanding how the context plays out in Congress with our national research agencies and other research and learning associations and scholarly societies. I have to say that in my first year, I spent a lot of time going to the national science agencies and the national academies. And what I was really impressed with, but also made me step back, was how much of this research is data-centered, how much of it is carried over decades and decades of work with maybe 200 collaborators or more on a particular project, how much it is interdisciplinary, and how important it is to be able to preserve and make this information accessible for future generations. It's a bit daunting. Over the course of the year, we engage with these stakeholders to figure out how best to align our programs with and engage on national and international scientific priorities, to bridge public and institutional policies, which you may know are not always aligned, to advocate for changes in federal legislation. So for now, exactly right now, we're really dealing with some copyright challenges, and to build new skills and competencies. After those conversations, we sat back and asked ourselves, where can we make a difference? Where can this association of 124 organizations make a difference? And so what we were asked, given the rapid adoption of emerging technologies, the huge prioritization of artificial intelligence on the national and on actually most national agendas, and in the United States, a very deep set of questions about the value of higher education, specifically in the humanities. And stepping back even a little further and knowing that over the past 20 years, we've created many silos of information. Yes, some connections like HathiTrust, but still many silos. And now we are bursting with many new forms and massive amounts of it. In reflection, as an association, we felt we were being asked to create sustainable solutions, advocate for the value and trust of education, which is so fundamental to critical thinking and democracy, and remember that our focus must be on the public good. So with that, we set out an action plan, which I invite you to look at on our website. But today I'm going to talk about 3 of the 6 priorities. The first is open science. The second is the preparation for artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies and related disciplines, and the really important role of diversity, equity, inclusion throughout. I'll use the remaining time to talk about these by highlighting the context, providing you some examples from our member institutions, and sharing some resources. And all of our resources are available on our website. So let's talk about partners in open science. In 2018, the National Academies produced a consensus document on open science by design. And really what it was saying is we need to look at practices being open from the moment we think about research to the moment we conclude our research. And one of the things I heard today in one of the smaller rooms was just this changing role of research librarians. In the United States, we often call them library liaisons, and how important it is for us to get in the research process in the moment of provocation or ideation, not just at the end when we need to preserve it or describe it to make it accessible. And so this is something that has been going on in our countries as well. But there is more than that we have to do. And so we formed a program this year called Scholars and Scholarship. And the mission of that, the purpose of that, is to catalyze collective efforts to ensure enduring and barrier-free information. It's focused on policy and practice on a three-pronged approach. First of all, we're working with research institutions, individual research institutions, in the context of their own research integrity. We're working with academic leadership associations like the American Association of Universities, the Association of Public Land-Grant Universities, on the implementation of effective research data practices. And we're working with scholarly societies and research communities on shared agenda for open and equitable leadership. So what does this look like in a little more concrete way? So today, the National Library of Medicine, that you will probably know through its amazing work on PubMed, is looking at the costs, the simple cost of having to maintain the global database of that information. What is the role and responsibility of the institutions where that research takes place versus just sort of passing it off to a national agency? It is really a difficult question. Another area that we worked in is working with the Association of American Universities and the land-grant universities. We talk about data being sort of the most valuable piece of information in today's research environment, and yet many of our institutions do not have really working research data management practices. The public policy says you need to have a data management plan, but the institution and the faculty are not that excited about doing it. I'm sure that for some of you that may be familiar. So essentially, we brought 30 intact teams from across the United States and Canada, vice presidents of research, CIOs, general counsels, librarians, academic computing groups, and we sat down. Some of these individuals from their own institutions had never worked together. We brought them and we worked together on what would an institutional research data management policy look like. So all these teams will actually be coming back next year. We'll try to see where we are with them. But I think one of the things that stood out and made me very proud to be in our field was that almost every single institution there recognized or had learned to recognize the incredible value of the research library in that process. We're also creating safe spaces for the social sciences and STEM scholarly societies where we can bring in publishers, funders, faculty, and librarians to figure out what would be an economically viable solution for open access to information. I loved that slide the other day. It takes many cups of tea, and the Association of Research Libraries does that. In this age of innovation, the association advocates for libraries to explore, invest, improve, and leverage approaches to scholarly communications. We do have to take risks in order to make progress. And it's challenging in that innovation is the nature of our creativity, but to remain relevant, that means research libraries must transcend time by stewarding knowledge regardless of the innovation that creates it. And we may be one of the only institutions I know that cannot throw out the old to adopt the new. Any shift or transformation that necessarily must take into account the past is expensive and time-consuming. Nevertheless, we need to proceed with confidence. Today, I'm sharing a couple of examples because we're celebrating open access this week. Yay! Some would say we have made little progress. And honestly, I was at Harvard, and the people on my team were responsible for the Harvard model. And so it's just taken time to do this. But we are making strides. We're making strides on sustainable infrastructure through SCOTS and other initiatives like Invest in Open, with the adoption of the Plan S principles and now the implementation plan. We're gathering momentum, but it's not a standard yet. The Libraries of California, as you probably know, are seeking transformative agreements with publishers so that the research of all University of California faculty will be open to all, not limited to those who can afford it. The University of California represents about 10% of they represent a significant number of scholars in the United States, so this is a big deal. This week, actually it's probably about 4 days ago, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who's also a member, recently issued its open access framework recommendations to broaden MIT's faculty open access policy, which will also cover all MIT authors, and they will be adopting open access policy for monographs. It's been received very well, but it still is a recommendation, so there's more work to do. Last week, Australia and New Zealand, you probably know this too, but I was impressed, announced the first transformative agreement with the UK's Microbiology Society. And today, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, signed an open access agreement with SAGE. So things are happening. The Association of Research Libraries tries to use our strength to support this in order to expand access to research. We applaud these commitments to the values and the vision they articulate, even at the expense of disruption. And as a professor of NIT put it, scholarship serves humanity best when it is available to everyone. We continue to see advancement in open access in monographs, and I'm sharing here the Michigan Publishing, their press, because it's been a slow go for the monograph world, but without open monographs, we're not going to see a lot of advancement in open access in the humanities. Certainly MIT's recent announcement will help. 35 of our members actually oversee the university presses in their institutions. And so this is also the case for the University of Michigan. It has been a transformative center of gravity with its leadership in HathiTrust and its charter participation in an initiative known lovingly as TOME, toward an open access monograph ecosystem. This movement is spearheaded by the Association of Research Libraries, the Association of American Universities, and the Association of University Presses. And tome works are published by a press that maintains a high standard of peer review, editorial support, and marketing. In fact, there's a couple of presses in this region. The Otago University Press is a member of the Association of University Presses, and the University of New South Wales Press is as well. All publishers who are members of the Association of University Presses are considered immediately eligible, so something to think about. ARL convenes and participates in communities from across the research and learning ecosystem. We have to do this together. Collectively, we can do this. It's very hard to do it otherwise. Here are some examples. So we belong to a group called the International Association of Research Library Associations, IARLA, and we love our acronyms, don't we? So IARLA represents the research libraries of the UK, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, LIBER, which is the European Union, and CALL from Australia. We've been working together with members of Plan S in order to focus particularly on transparency in licensing terms and pricing, to leverage our knowledge about new financial models, and to work through the new directions that open access can provide us with the availability of our repositories, whether they're disciplinary or institutional. We also know that one of the barriers to adoption of data management plans is the fact that it costs too much and people don't have the time. So we are convening this December a group of experts to increase research data discoverability through persistent identifiers for data. So something like ORCID for the author, but now persistent identifiers for data itself, and looking at the way to adopt machine-readable data management plans. We live in a time of so much change, and we have so many pressing issues. We need to focus on the ones that are going to matter most to our members, and so we've just formed a digital content task force because of this question of how are we going to manage large sets of research data over time. So I don't know if how many of you are familiar with the Amazon snowmobile. Has anybody here heard about the Amazon snowmobile? And it's not a snowmobile, just. So the Amazon snowmobile is a storage device for exabytes of information that it can make available to you. And it's been used for massive amounts of research data, but including the National Archives of the United States has been looking at this as a solution for some of their own storage. So these are just things we have to address. How are we going to provide access to all forms of knowledge in the context of many traditions and cultures? How will we increase accessibility to digital content? So much of our content is not accessible to the sight impaired. And how will we sustain both digital and physical collections when our own institutions are challenged with the funds for the research itself? So now I want to speak a little bit to our second commitment, which is preparing for emerging technologies. If there is anything to take away from the outset of this industrial revolution, is that we need to be ready. Someone's called librarians research information whisperers. In a way, think of that like horse whisperers or sages that people can trust to get it right, even if we don't have the content ourselves. We need to lead this individually, organizationally, institutionally, and societally. We really are at the point where patchwork change has proven that it cannot keep up with a digital transformation taking place all around us. We must get into the systems of change within our institutions and partner. We need a strategic commitment and approach to digital transformation. Higher education has been talking about and looking at digital transformation. I know other areas like educational technology are looking at digital transformation. What will be our approach? So over the course of the past year, the ARL Academy worked with members to identify their most immediate professional development needs. And what they came back to us with is develop and pilot program for leadership of digital transformations in data science, assessment and analytics, and innovation. So I'm going to speak to just very briefly to a couple of these. So in the context of today's sweeping social, economic, technological, and demographic changes, digital transformation is a series of deep and coordinated culture, workforce, and technology shifts that help us identify new models that we need to use for transforming our operations, figuring out our strategic direction, and ensuring we continue to deliver the expected value. There are examples of this. For example, the University of Indiana and New York Public Library are actually looking at machine learning to translate video into text so that they can make their videos more accessible. We see chatbot services in many libraries at the moment, but it is very important to decide how to use these new technologies and when to use them. This week, we were asked if data is a precious thing. And my answer is a resounding yes. And your data may be the most precious thing besides your life, of course, and your family that you have. Data is so valuable. And what we need to understand is how we want to make our data accessible. And when it is already there, how do we have people understand their own, what is accessible and what isn't, and what control they have and what control they don't have. Part of the work that we're doing is actually trying to work with institutions so that they understand the licensing terms they need to make when they actually might be signing over student data or faculty data to third parties. The association has a long history of leadership development. And we are in the midst of reviewing our emerging leaders and executive leadership programs. Why? Because we have to think about what does it mean to be fluent in information to say? What does it mean in terms of the types of information policies we need to advocate for when it isn't as clear all the time what are the right privacy positions to take? And what does it mean in terms of partner with others who are looking at ethics in terms of data and the use of information? We need to understand how we will be inclusive leaders, and actually something that I will take away with me when I go back is increasing connectedness and engagement. Inclusiveness is just not enough. How are we going to partner? How do we actually give up our power, some of it, in order to advance the full mission of research and learning? And how do we provide value that our decision makers understand? We're also conducting a research project on the changing roles of deans and directors and what decision makers expect from them. A lot of the roles of our research library leaders are changing. And the constitution of our association has also changed. Well, there are 124 members. Over half of those leadership positions have changed in the last 5 years. And this is not going to stop soon. We have a massive demographic change occurring within our community. And as these roles change, overseeing presses, archives, museums, online learning, IT, and even academic innovation, what does this mean? And what do our leaders, what do provosts, what do chancellors, what are they expecting from these libraries? I want to share a couple of examples where I see opportunity still to come and where I actually see something immediately applicable. So at our recent fall forum on the role of libraries as catalysts in a time of constant flux, while examples did surface, the overwhelming response was that we are not prepared enough. So in the United States, there are about 200 data science centers offering certificates, bachelor's, and master's degrees. So in one instance, which is a really spectacular example of next generation science, are the Moore Sloan data environments. These are in New York University, Boston, and the University of Boston. And only in one of these is the library actually playing any role at all as a location. It's a location for the center. But there are emerging examples that can serve as models for strong institutional collaboration, such as the University of Virginia, where the individual who's responsible for the implications of data science across the university is partnering very closely with the library. One example that I think if you don't know about it, I encourage you to learn more about it. And you could read about it on our research library issue on the ethics of artificial intelligence. Mike Ridley, who's the librarian emeritus from the University of Guelph in Canada, explains explainable artificial intelligence. And really, this is a way for us to enable human users to understand, appropriately trust, and effectively manage the emerging generation of artificially intelligent partners. We need to understand that these artificial intelligence systems will have the ability to explain their own rationale, to characterize their strengths and weaknesses, and convey an understanding of how they will behave in the future. This is going to happen. ARL works with other associations on shared goals through convenings, creating knowledge and understanding, developing solutions, and I'm going to share one example. So just recently, we kicked off an 18-month project with the Coalition of Network Information and EDUCAUSE. So the Coalition of Network Information began as a joint initiative between EDUCAUSE, which was called something else at that time, and the Association of Research Libraries. So we continue to collaborate very closely. Coalition of Network Information and EDUCAUSE are really global associations. The question we're trying to answer is, what does a maturity model look like for a research library that's an integral part to the changes underway in the use of emerging technologies in research and learning? This is 3 phases. Right now, we're doing a current state analysis of what's being practiced in research libraries. We're interviewing experts in research and learning about which emerging technologies we should pay attention to and which are just frankly overhyped. And then we're going to spend time speaking with decision makers and librarians and partners about the opportunities for research libraries, concluding in early 2021 with recommendations and actions. In the meantime, while we all wait for those results, we're seeking to engage with research and learning community members to provide research librarians with the information they need. So this year, our research library issues focused on privacy and ethics, data science, the ethics of artificial intelligence, and our upcoming issue in December will be on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now I want to talk to you about the third of 3 commitments. We know that societies and organizations that are diverse, equitable, and inclusive bring strength to any task and are much more innovative. We know that well-being and advancement with people in mind comes down to us, people. In 2016, Ithaca S&R conducted a survey study on employee demographics and director perspectives. The results were really, truly stark. Women represent the majority of library employees. That was probably not a big surprise. 71% of employees were white. And as positions became increasingly senior, they also became increasingly white. 87% in 2016, 87% of executive leadership in our research libraries was white. And I'm sure you know that does not reflect the demographics of the society that we live in. Our focus is on recruitment, retention, and advancement through fellows and scholarship programs and mentorship. We have to increase access to collections from underrepresented populations, and we must increase information accessibility. In August of this year, the Ohio State University hosted the IDEAL Conference. This conference had over 600 participants from the United States and Canada, many, many more than were expected. It was great. It provided an opportunity for professionals at every level and across sectors to discuss how increasing workplace diversity and creating an inclusive workplace environment improves organizational effectiveness, creativity, adaptability, and relevance, most importantly, relevance to the communities served by the organization. Another area that we're focused on is the fact that so many voices are not heard in our collections. This example from the University of British Columbia represents but one of the initiatives at that university. I don't know if you're familiar with their Weiwa library, which is the, yay! I've been blessed, I've been there, it's fantastic. And that is it's a First Nations library in British Columbia. It's by First Nations communities, for First Nations communities. Its really services reflect Aboriginal approaches to teaching, learning, and research. When I was at the University of British Columbia, I also got to see this amazing collection, which is called the Chung Collection. Now, this collection, it was also collected by an immigrant from China. And these pieces were collected over time to document their experience during the exploration of British Columbia, immigration and colonization, particularly the settling of Chinese communities, and the history of the Canadian Pacific Railway. And the reason I wanted to highlight it is because it was recently added to Canada Memory of the World Register, which is a very wonderful honor. So for over 20 years, the association has focused on recruiting underrepresented populations into the profession and working to support their career advancement. Our Kaleidoscope program, which began in the year 2000, is funded by our member libraries. This goal is to attract historically underrepresented groups to careers in research libraries and archives. And beyond funding, which will never be enough, it provides mentoring, leadership, and professional development and career placement assistance. We also have a program for mid-career librarians from historically underrepresented groups. They take this course in order, it's a year-long, to take on leadership roles in their careers and in the profession at large. This launched in 1997, and a large percentage have actually assumed expanding responsibilities. But this is not enough. Change cannot occur when the surrounding organizational structure and environment do not support diversity, equity, inclusion, and do not represent the communities we serve. And as you heard, the Ithaca S&R findings highlighted the breadth and depth of change that must occur for truly creating opportunities within our work environments. So beyond recruiting, retaining, and advancing underrepresented populations, we must change ourselves. So in December, a group from across the United States and Canada of associations and experts will be collectively looking at ways in which we can work together to have an impact on racial equity in libraries. So rather than doing this alone, we'll be much better if we work together. I was particularly impressed with Angela Jewell's presentation yesterday, and I see it not only a way forward for youth, but for all of us. We have to continue to emphasize diversity, equity, and inclusion in all our programs and live by our guiding values and our code of conduct. If we are to be bold, we must be visible. Through all we do, we work to advocate and communicate on behalf of and with our members and others who share our mission. Our focus is on working with coalitions that are consistent with our values. It usually takes the form of information policy as it relates to legislation and federal bills covering privacy, research and administrative data management, intellectual property and copyright, accessibility, open science, and access to government information. In fact, we're waiting with bated breath for the update to the Holdren memo from 2013, which we hope will also focus on open research data. All of these policies and laws are changing much more slowly than the technology itself. In fact, the evolution of laws and policies always seem to lag innovation. Therefore, we in this room, we must be very information savvy and actively engaged in legal and public policies to ensure the consequences of all these innovations address public good. Some of the ways in which we advocate and address public policy are through amicus briefs, working on the implementation of the Marrakesh Treaty, taking our questions to the courts and to Congress. We use media such as social media, news, and provide access to resources. And because we're in DC, we have a team that goes on to what we call the Hill to educate staffers so that they can ensure our language is included in congressional conversations. In summary, I've tried to share with you a little bit of what's happening in our world. I think globally, though, we are living and practicing as knowledge guides and stewards in a time of exponential change, a pace of change not likely to slow down anytime soon, and bringing all kinds of wonderful opportunities. It is a time for us as knowledge stewards to think about a new relationship between critical thinking and comprehending the sum of our knowledge, whether we hold it in our collections or whether we make it accessible through our networks. This statement, new relationship between critical thinking and comprehending the sum of our knowledge, originated from the editor of Vannevar Bush's seminal work in 1945 called As We May Think. It's often attributed to be the first known concept of machine learning. What's so telling is that the tech innovations described by Vannevar Bush drove his conclusions for the need to focus on the changes in governance, laws, and policies to ensure that the innovations created change for public good. What we have learned and embraced with our role as knowledge stewards in another time of epic change is that we must and can lead, and we must participate in local, national, and international relationships if we want to truly create equitable, enduring, and barrier-free information environments. Librarians are trusted advisors and curators of knowledge. Let's be the research information whisperers that is needed now. As pointed out by Jaron Laniers and others, our communities could benefit from, so that our communities can benefit from and contribute to knowledge curation, that they can know enough to know when they are presented with the truth, to understand the context in order to determine the meaning, and to be actively engaged in all this great innovation occurring today. We must get up to speed quickly so that we can help others to do so. Let's celebrate the great work already underway. Let's shine a light on it and prepare for what's next to ensure we deliver value, we live our values, and we create opportunities for all. It's up to us. Thank you.
Well, what can I say after that? Honestly, I just, that's really, to hear all of that, and especially what you're saying about research libraries, it just applies to all libraries, whether you're in public, special, or research institution libraries. What you just shared with us today resonates across all our sectors. And in terms of looking at at the all of us emerging technologies in learning, in teaching, and in research, the opportunities that we look at and embrace in partnering with our communities, with our families, and those communities, whether they be universities or communities or whatever communities we are tasked with in our institutions, those great opportunities in this world of fast-paced, changing information, AI, artificial intelligence, etc., and to look at and questioning ourselves around, is this ethical, and looking at data, whose data, and whose ethics, and looking at our diverse communities, and the whole conference theme about our communities, our libraries, our families. Whose families are we talking about here? Which communities? And those are the questions that we have to also take with us when we look at what values are we espousing of whakawhanaungatanga, of āwhina, of looking after our taonga, for our communities and our families, and building that trust with our communities and our families. And then we will have sustainable, endurable, lasting partnerships. So, ngā mihi nui atu ki a koe. Thank you for those words of encouragement, and for us to look within ourselves, look at our spaces, and share and collaborate, because we are LIANZA, and we be the change, and we are the change. Ngā mihi nui.